Hello and welcome to this town hall from Doha Debates. I'm Dena Takruri and I'll be your moderator for what promises to be an engaging conversation about the future of Palestinian identity. We're here at a historic moment in Qatar when the eyes of the world are on this country, the first ever Arab country to host the FIFA World Cup. Fans from around the globe have traveled here to cheer on their respective nations. The World Cup reminds us just how fundamental and meaningful national identity is to our own individual identities. And nowhere is the love of the nation state more evident than on the football pitch. Now, despite not officially playing in the tournament, Palestinians have taken the spotlight as the unofficial 33rd team of this World Cup. We've seen fans and players enthusiastically wave the Palestinian flag inside and outside stadiums in an unprecedented display of global solidarity with the Palestinian cause. It has been nearly 75 years since Israel was established at the expense of Palestine's indigenous population. Today, about half of the world's estimated 14 million Palestinians live in the diaspora, and our identity as a united people is under threat. It is against this backdrop that we're hosting this town hall to better understand what Palestinian identity means, in what ways it's fractured, and where it's headed. As a Palestinian American myself, this is an issue that is both important and personal. My identity as a Palestinian and the intimate understanding of oppression that comes with it is what has propelled me as a journalist to report on stories of injustices around the world. I am delighted today to be joined by students and recent graduates from universities here in Qatar, many of whom are Palestinians from the diaspora as well. And on stage, I'm joined by three guests. Dr. Tariq Dana is an assistant professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies and policy advisor for the Palestinian Policy Network Al-Shabaka, which educates and fosters public debate on Palestinian human rights. Ahed Tamimi is a Palestinian activist from the small West Bank village of Nabi Saleh, and I am proud to have co-authored her newly released memoir, They Called Me a Lioness, A Palestinian Girl's Fight for Freedom. She will also have translation accompanying her here. And finally, Maysoon Zayid is a comedian, Princeton Fellow, and disability advocate. She's also the co-founder of the New York Arab American Comedy Festival and Muslim Funny Fest. Now, without further ado, I want to just broadly launch into this question of what does it mean to be Palestinian and to have a national identity without a nation? Ahed, you have drawn international attention to the Palestinian cause through your activism and also through your time in prison. Tell us what your Palestinian identity means for you within your fight for freedom.
طبعاً بالنسبة لي الهوية الفلسطينية هي اللي شكلتني كعهد، يعني لولا هويتي الفلسطينية لكان عهد ما كانتش موجودة اليوم قدامكم وبتحكي عن القضية الفلسطينية. الهوية الفلسطينية هي اللي زرعت فينا الصبر والقوة والصمود كفلسطينيين. هويتنا الفلسطينية هي اللي صنعت منا كفلسطينيين القوة لأنه نكمل بالنضال والمقاومة.
I just have to quickly note that, I know Ahed really well at this point, and her big dream in life as a child growing up under occupation in the West Bank was to become a professional football player. Of course, the occupation ensured that that would never happen, but she is here at the World Cup representing Palestine. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that and how proud I am to see that. Tariq, I want to turn to you as a Palestinian intellectual who draws on the vast knowledge and experiences of the Palestinian people. Why is it that you think that Palestinian identity has managed to persevere or even thrive as it has for so long?
Well, the key word here is resistance and steadfastness, either in its passive form, meaning maintaining Palestinian presence on the land, to prevent the Israeli from stealing further lands, properties, and so on, but also the active form of steadfastness that is resistance, either in its armed form, popular struggle, violent, non-violent, or utilizing other platforms for resistance. You mentioned something important, a question that can be controversial for some people. Can be there a national identity without a nation or without a state? In fact, yes, if put this in a historical context, we see that most national identities in the global south emerged under colonialism. It was a way to challenge colonialism. So it was formed, developed for liberation, self-determination. It was a way to create collective identity to consolidate the anti-colonial struggle. Then, when a state was established, this national identity then was consolidated. So the Palestinians are undergoing this path. National identity is a very significant aspect of their struggle. But at the same time, I would like to acknowledge the fact that Palestinian national identity is not ethnic, is not racial. It's dominated for sure by pan-Arabism and other multidimensional aspects, religion, for example, and other loyalties. But also, I would say, giving the centrality of the justice of Palestinian cause at the regional level and worldwide, I would identify anyone who would support Palestinian struggle for justice as part of this identity. So it's identity that reflects the concept of justice at the global scale, right?
And Maysoon, you have said in the past that you have one foot in the United States and one in Palestine. How has it meant for you to grow up with this split identity, and how do you preserve your Palestinian identity?
I think it's fascinating that as Palestinians in the diaspora, it is so often not our choice. And when I think about growing up in America and spending my summers in Palestine, I always felt so much more at home in Palestine because I am a multiple minority. And a lot of people ask me, like, what's it harder? Is it harder to be a woman or is it harder to be disabled? And I always say the hardest aspect is being Palestinian. Because yes, I'm discriminated as a woman. I'm discriminated as a disabled person. But as a Palestinian, my existence is literally denied. Like so often when I post about being Palestinian online, they say Palestinians don't exist. And I always respond, I guess I'm a scary ghost. So we're literally a people who have other people challenge our very existence. But then we do stuff like this. And I think no matter how much they tried to sever the Palestinian identity, the people in 48, the people in Gaza, the Tariq Dana like me, there's such a unity. And wherever you go in the world, if you bump into a Palestinian, there's this instant friendship. And for me, being here in Qatar and seeing the younger generation of Palestinians so loud and proud, it has helped me solidify my identity so that no matter how much people try to erase it, the stronger, brighter, and bolder it gets.
Yeah. When you mentioned the constant erasure of our identity, it brought one recent incident to mind, and I was on assignment in the West Bank this past summer. I went to report from Hebron, which is where my family's from, both sides, generations and generations, in the old city. And as I was there, we were waiting to enter Shuhada Street, which no Palestinians are allowed to walk on, even though it was once a thriving Palestinian bustling street. So we're waiting, and a settler comes by and wants to talk to me. Okay, you want to be interviewed? I'll interview you. Brooklyn accent, came straight from New York, and to my face has the nerve to tell me there's no such thing as Palestinians. So that was peak, having to prove our humanity. But I do want to turn it over.
It's interesting, they say we don't exist, and yet they can deny us entry.
Right.
So do we exist or not? Apparently that's the fear, we do exist.
That's exactly right. And we've proven it in such a joyful, positive way at this World Cup. It's been so heartening to see. I want to turn it over to the students now. Bushra, you are a first-year university student in Qatar. Tell us a little bit about your Palestinian identity and its significance to you.
I'd say that my Palestinian identity shapes me.
Can you just maybe hold the microphone a little closer and speak a little louder?
I'd say that my Palestinian identity shapes me, and it shapes my goals and how I envision my future to be. So there's this right of return that we have to fight for, because I believe it's the duty of each and every single Palestinian to want to return to where our ancestors came from. Not to mention that my identity is one that's subject to constant erasure. It's one that denies me many chances. So it characterizes how the trajectory of my life and other Palestinians' lives tends to go. So I'd say that's its significance to me. And yeah.
Thank you. And you know, when we're talking about erasure, of course, it's not just metaphorical. For many people, especially those living in Palestine, in the occupied territories, it's literal. Isra, I know you grew up in Gaza, so you're facing the literal risk and threat of obliteration. Tell us a little bit about your experience.
So I don't know from where I can start. Actually, when it comes in terms of identity, we need to understand or ask firstly, what do we mean by identity? Is it the paper that they give us when we born? Because it will be a little bit different and hard, because no state, as Dr. Tariq mentioned before, no state, so how we can identify ourselves? Is it the cultural or religious identity? But I guess each Palestinian, either in Palestine or outside of Palestine, they has their own story of identity. For me, for example, I had a different story, because when my brother died in 2008, he was shot by Israeli army. My identity totally changed, because the right, it's come to be another view or another right way of how I fight or identify myself. But I guess the most important thing, and we also always common inside or outside Palestine, the right of resistance or a resistance per people. This is the most important identity that we carry, each one of us in Palestine. As Gazans, we are carrying like a heavy weight of how we can live under this all restrictions, occupied wars. Each like 2 to 3 years we have this war and we're supposed to fight, and then we try to live after it. Whenever you are a student and you want to travel out of Gaza, you has like a huge fight how you will travel. Because personally, when I got the scholarship in 2017, I want to get out through the West Bank. I supposed to take a permission from the Israelis, so it was so hard. So I guess it's so hard to give a specific identity to the Palestinians, because in each field they need to introduce themselves as something, but at the most, or at the end of the day, they like identify themselves as resistance and the people who's fighting all the time, the fighters and the resistance. This is the only identity that we carry in Gaza and in West Bank. But I guess also 48 people and the people who's born and grown up outside Palestine, they have a totally different kind of identity. The people outside Palestine, they are trying to find like the right of how we exist, not just as people, just as a human, refugees, because always they're taking this right. So human identity, resistance and fighters, this is the identity that all of us as a Palestinian are common on it.
Yeah, let's have you expand on that and introduce yourself, feel free.
My name is Yasmin Abu Ghazaleh. There is always a joke going around that you can't speak to a Palestinian without them telling you they're Palestinian. And I think this is very important actually, because you wouldn't find this in other nationalities because they're not at risk of being erased. So for us, we're just grasping at everything, anything where there is like food, a pin, a kufiya, a abaya, anything, just to prove that we're still here, we're Palestinian. And people in the diaspora face even a bigger challenge because some of us have different passports. You have an American passport, we have Jordanian passports. So you're like, oh, you're American, you're not really Palestinian. You're Jordanian, خلاص يعني, take your Jordanian passport and just live. This is like, it's a new challenge because then if you say, no, I'm Palestinian, they're like, oh, you're not appreciating your Jordanian passport? What has Jordan done to you? And like, it's not that. I am Jordanian, I am Palestinian, but we need to remind people that we're Palestinian because this is the identity that's at risk, not the other one.
Have you guys felt that with the advent of social media and how much more connected we all are, that it's easier to come out and be proud about your Palestinian identity? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mu'min. I'm from city of Tulkarem, Palestine, and I grew up here in Doha. So I believe currently there is a misleading stereotypical image about us Palestinians, that we are always suffering and we can't even experience joy or life. And I believe this one-dimensional stereotypical image was created about us because of the legacy media and how they practice parachute journalism and how they report on incidents on ground as numbers and not humans. So I believe we are humans, we are not numbers. And I believe in the power of social media and films. So my question is how we can use these new media tools and filmmaking to tell more authentic stories about Palestinians, to show the huge diversity in Palestinians' identity inside and outside Palestine. And thank you.
I'm obsessed with social media, so I want to take this. It's been really interesting for me watching this generation of Palestinians fight the fight on social media. Because I'm one of those like non-violent people. And when I was growing up, they invade Jenin, they invade Nablus, they turned them into rubble. And we couldn't see any of the images. The Israelis controlled every single image we saw. But now we have a generation that grew up, that understands film, that understands media, that understands English, and has this incredible opportunity to tell that story from the point of view of the people who live it. And I think it's so interesting that you mentioned for us who are outside its existence, for you who are inside its survival. But one of the things we know is that they've tried to separate us for decades. And I feel like social media has really united the Palestinians, because if you're in Colombia or Doha or Gaza, we can all now communicate. But even with the social media, it's still controlled. Because if you don't have electricity and you don't have internet, you actually don't have social media and you can't get that story out. And I'd just like to wrap up this part by the importance of language. When we communicate on social media, we have to use the language that the people who are our audience understand. The word occupation. Occupation means a job in America. That's not a bad thing. We need to say things like ethnic cleansing, like apartheid, like discrimination. Don't say settlement. A settlement means you got a lot of money. You have to say violent supremacists. So when you're using that tool, watch your language. Words matter. And please don't just show the struggle, show the joy. So show that we exist. When I do my web series, it's pizza parlors and gorgeous like flowers, because part of our humanity is showing that we have joy also.
You did, we do, we have joy. Yeah, that is something to be celebrated, absolutely. You did touch on the fragmentation of the Palestinian people, which I want to discuss a little bit because, as we know, one of the consequences of Israel's colonial project is the geographic and political fragmentation of Palestinians. Ahed, maybe since you live there under occupation in the West Bank, you can paint us a picture of what life under this reality is like, and has social media allowed especially your generation to transcend some of these forced divisions among our people?
طبعا الحقيقة إنه إحنا بنعيش في الضفة الغربية أو بفلسطين بشكل عام. إحنا مقسمين لمناطق A و B و C، واللي كتير مناطق كمان ما بنقدر نروح عليها. طبعا هذا الإشي اللي خلق تشتت بين الشعب الفلسطيني نفسه، والتشرد اللي صار بالنكبة وبعدين فهذا شتت كل الشعب الفلسطيني. بس من المهم احنا نرجع نوحد الهدف عشان نقدر نجمع الهوية لأنها تجزأ. زي ما بنشوف بالهبة الأخير اللي صارت، كل العالم وقف مع الشعب الفلسطيني، لأنه إحنا كشعب فلسطيني داخل فلسطين وبالشتات كان هدفنا واحد وواضح. لما وحدنا هدفنا ورحنا للعالم بخطاب المقاتلين والمناضلين، مش بخطاب الضحية اللي بتطلب بس شقفة. وقتها كل العالم وقف معنا كمقاتلين كمان، حتى كأردنية صاروا مثلا يفهموا إنه في فرق بين الوطن والمواطنة. فلقيت الأردن نفسه مثلا بنزل على الشارع على الحدود مع الفلسطيني عشان نقاوم. فالفكرة إنه إحنا لازم نوحد هدفنا كفلسطينيين في الداخل والخارج عشان هويتنا تتوحد وما تكونش متجزأة، لأنه الاحتلال عمل بشكل كبير على تجزئتها.
Yes, please jump in.
I think my name is Lafan, by the way. I think a lot of us here are part of the Palestinian diaspora. And something that social media has done to kind of connect us together, or to make us kind of more in tune with what is Palestine. You know, loads of people from the diaspora don't know what Palestine looks like. You know, so with social media, you get to actually see what your land looks like, what you're fighting for. To some degree, of course, it's not just the land we're fighting for, it's the right to exist. But that being said, as much as social media has been a great thing for everyone, I do think that it's very, very important to note that technology and algorithms, they're biased as well. You know, they can be used in very oppressive ways. You know, during the time where Palestinian activism was like a really big thing, especially I think that during the COVID time, it was amazing. And then after, by like a week or two, you started to see Palestine spelt with a 4 instead of an A, 3 instead of an E, because the algorithms were kind of pushing the content down. So as much as it's been something that's very helpful, we do have to keep mindful that it can be something that's also oppressive.
I want to explore the moment that Ahed was talking about, which, as we all remember, of May of 2021. It was that Sheikh Jarrah moment, also attacks on Al-Aqsa, also another war on Gaza. And we saw an unprecedented, or somewhat unprecedented, collective uprising of all of the people in Palestine, from 48 to Gaza, to the West Bank, to Jerusalem, protest together and actually do a nationwide strike. Tariq, to what extent was that moment a turning point, and has that momentum endured?
Well, that moment is a repetition of many moments in the modern history of Palestine during anti-colonial struggle and resistance. Well, are the Palestinian victims? For sure. But is it good to continue victimization? This would lead to negative consequences, as we witnessed. I would like to mention 2 areas where the Palestinians appeared as passive victims, recipient of international aid, humanitarian relief, without having a powerful political say or collective action. Firstly, immediately after the Palestinian Nakba of 1948, where they found themselves in refugee camps. So there was attempt by Western states, superpowers, to exclude the political dimension of the Palestinian cause and present the Palestinians as only refugees who require some assistance. But when the Palestinians managed to build national movement, PLO, different Palestinian political movements and factions, then they managed to impose their agenda at the globalist stage. Also, the First Palestinian Intifada was a significant chapter on Palestinian struggle that not only unified the Palestinians in their diverse fragmented locations, 1967 territories, Jerusalem, 48 refugee camps, but also attracted many international, transnational solidarities in Palestine. However, after Oslo, we unfortunately, to a large extent, the Palestinian leadership destroyed many of these achievements and again presented the Palestinian as passive actors that requires, international interventions to take care of them, to protect them from Israel. Well, no one understood with the Palestinian as long as they are passive. If they prove themselves on the ground through collective struggle, you will find unity, internal unity emerge spontaneously, but also strong solidarity from diverse international actors.
Dena, I'd love to jump in. I think what was so fascinating about that time, and as Tariq said, there's so much repetition, was the holidays were very close by to each other. And as the Israeli supremacists were beating the living daylights out of people praying at dawn during Ramadan in Jerusalem, in Al-Aqsa, in the Dome of the Rock, it became very easy for me to explain to people something I had always found very hard, which was, I said, it's like beating people up on Christmas Eve at St. Patrick's Cathedral. And I said, look, if you're a Jewish baby born in the Bethlehem area, you have full rights. If you're a Muslim baby or a Christian baby, you have no rights. And the vehicle to explain this to people was that unity, where we saw Palestinians from wherever they were and the international community finally saying it is not okay to discriminate, abuse, and ethnically cleanse people because they're born the wrong faith.
Absolutely. How did you guys experience that moment? I want to open up to the students here. Yeah.
So, hi, my name is Zain. We were in Qatar when that moment happened, and it was such an amazing moment because all Palestinians within Qatar sort of unified together. We saw like the social media uproar within Palestinians here and people that stood in solidarity with Palestinians. But for the first time, we saw people organizing even outside. We had sort of car parades. Everyone came with their Palestinian flags to sort of go around and, show solidarity. We saw different events. It was during COVID, so we'd have webinars and so on. And it was a really, really great moment to sort of unite together, even though we're in diaspora, to come together to, at a moment where everything was, we saw what happened in Sheikh Jarrah and then in Gaza, and it was like, a moment where we were all in despair to come together and unite and try to find ways we can help our Palestinian brothers and sisters in Palestine from Qatar.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Tuba Taji. I just want to add on, I think media has a really big portion to do with Israel's existence as a whole. I think what was touched on earlier was film. An amazing point to make was the movie Farha and how that's had such a huge influence on Israel's existence already, and how Instagram has been, demonetizing or censoring a lot of the posts about Farha merely shows the type of silent support that the West has for Israel. And of course, it's not only a political view. I think it's also economical. I think by demonetizing Farha, you have the opportunity to stay silent and to stay blind. For example, if I was a Palestinian living in America, like how Maysoon was or is, she would have to explain to people. But without having the content to kind of prove your point, you don't have anything to explain. And so it's like you're kind of sheltering yourself. It's like they say, the blind is bliss. So ignorance is bliss. And it's the same thing for here, where you don't need to open your eyes to anything else except from what you're being fed, which in this case is westernized media.
Absolutely. You know, yesterday, I know we were talking about the role of not just Palestinians, but our allies and other Arabs in this movement, in the fight for freedom. Did you want to share some of the thoughts that you were expressing yesterday?
Hi everyone, my name is Moza, and I think it's really important for us, as I'm personally Qatari, but I think this would apply to all non-Palestinians that stand in solidarity with Palestine. I think it's really important to not only wait for governments to take action, but as people to signal our values, to tell our governments and to tell the whole world, especially the West, that we stand in solidarity with Palestine with the few tools that we have. We might not have complete freedom here to do whatever we want because of the regulations we live under, but we have social media, for example, as we've talked about. And I've been working closely with student clubs at university, with youth-based platforms like Qatari Youth Against Normalization, to try to spread awareness more about Palestine and to find a new media source to get our information from, rather than just legacy media or like television and channels, because as Mu'min shared, those just show us numbers. And when you see numbers, you don't really know the context. Like, you hear the word diaspora and it's just a word for you if you don't know the context of what it means to be a person in diaspora. And that is why it's really important for non-Palestinians to connect more personally to Palestinians and to use opportunities like the FIFA World Cup. We've seen like demonstrations or collective actions from Arabs and non-Arabs alike raising the Palestinian flag. And we need to use those opportunities as people to raise awareness about the Palestinian cause. But what is more important is, because many Arab governments are normalizing relations with Israel now, by showing our opinion, we're signaling to the government what we, the people, believe in and what we'd like to happen for Palestine.
Nice.
Yeah.
She has a question right there. Okay.
Hi, Dina.
Hi.
I want just to add on to all the amazing conversations we've had. It's how social media became an inspiration for the younger generation. Us being a younger generation, our existence is also wiping off. They don't know, we don't know, like, what are we? Are you Jordanian Palestinian? Maybe you're from Europe, or maybe you're from America. So when we see inspirations like Ahed Tamimi, when we see Al-Kurd siblings, Mona and Muhammad, when they speak out about Palestine, that gives us the strength to speak up, yes, I am Palestinian. And this really shows the unity that we have in the younger generations. People in my classrooms would be asking, so what did you experience in Palestine? Did you ever visit Palestine? Unfortunately, I didn't have that chance to visit. But as for my grandparents who did, who share their sweet stories with us, that makes us even crave it more. We share that with them. We tell them how beautiful Palestine is. And when social media starts showing the streets and the colors, the culture, how we share with other nationalities, it really shows that there is unity, whether you are Palestinian or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure, we'll go next to you.
So this is Papa Nazir. I'm a Doha Debates ambassador. I have a question. So we're talking about all of this positive attitude that we have from social media and how it's helping us in this movement. But I want to know, since we had this disproportionate, you can say, coverage that came in for the war in Ukraine versus the war in Palestine, I wanted to know if that was something challenging that you guys faced. Was that something that made it more easier to put forward your truth, given that the biasness was seen, or did it make it more, you can say, easier to put it out there because of the dilution?
I think those of us in the West, when the Ukraine war started, it was a very clarifying moment, because we saw that the West can in fact get behind armed resistance and can in fact call things a foreign occupation when it's not Palestine, right? But one thing happened that was interesting, which is Ahed went viral again. Right when I don't know if you guys saw it, but right when the Ukraine war started, a clip of her from when she was maybe 10 or 12 years old confronting an Israeli soldier in Nabi Saleh went viral. And people were saying, look at this brave little Ukrainian girl standing up to this Russian soldier. Wow. And then when the fact checkers caught up and said, hey, that's actually not a Ukrainian girl, that's actually Ahed Tamimi and she's Palestinian, and this clip is from almost a decade ago, nobody seemed to care anymore. So let me ask you how that experience was for you and what kind of double standards did it really expose?
أول إشي بدي أوضح شغلة إنه بالحرب على أوكرانيا وكيف إنه فلسطين في احتلال وكيف كل العالم وقف مع أوكرانيا بنفس الوقت اللي العالم مش موقف فيه مع فلسطين. بالوقت اللي كانت فلسطين هي الإشي اللي كل العالم بحكي عنه، هي القضية اللي كل العالم بحكي عنها. إحنا كفلسطينيين إيش صار فينا؟ إيش التطور أو الإنجاز اللي صار معنا كفلسطينيين بإنه نغير من وجود الاستعمار لأرضنا. الفكرة مش إنه صار الحرب على أوكرانيا والتهى كل العالم مع الأوكرانيين نسي الفلسطينيين. الفكرة إنه أساساً كل العالم نسي القضية الفلسطينية، كل المجتمع الدولي نسي فلسطين من زمان. وهذا بخلينا كجيل إنه ما نعطي ثقتنا في مجتمع دولي أو قانون دولي أو مؤسسات دولية، وهذا بخلي جيلنا يلغي فكرة السلام من باله تماماً، وبيخلي للجيل هذا الخيار الوحيد وهو المقاومة بكافة أشكالها شو ما كانت على أرض الواقع، ويدحر هذا الاحتلال والاستعمار من فلسطين، من كل فلسطين.
So it's true that most of us here on stage belong to the roughly 7 million Palestinians that live in the diaspora. But right now I have a video comment from somebody who lives in Gaza. Her name is Hiba El-Saadi, and let's take a listen to what she said.
My maternal great-grandmother passed away at the age of 105. Before she died, I saw her give my grandfather a rusty-old key. She told him to keep it safe for when he would need it. It was for her childhood in American Majlis-style. Today, I live in Gaza. And you might not hear the scout drones flying over our skies, but know they are there. And you might not see the soldiers creeping up in the house and the husband, but know they are there. And I know I can't feel the pain the Palestinian diaspora feels, but I know that I can imagine that every moment they spend away from their home, it hurts. I used to wonder what keeps the Palestinians united. Is it suffering or is it hope? For my grandmother, it was the hope that she would use that key again. For those of you on the diaspora, what keeps you united?
The first time I saw that video message, I was really moved because she lives in Gaza, which we know is under a brutal siege, and here she is having compassion for those of us who live in the diaspora and those of us elsewhere. It's a beautiful question, and it's a really deep one, and I want to pose it to you guys. What is it that keeps us united as Palestinians? Is it suffering, or is it hope, or can it be both? Tamim.
Thank you for the question, Dina. I'm Tamim, by the way. I think that we have to recognize our suffering and acknowledge it, and that's a part of our identity, and we have to spread it, right? But at the same time, I think as Palestinian diaspora, I am much more united by hope, and I would say with every blood cell in my heart that the majority of Palestinian diaspora are actually united for the liberation of Palestine. And actually, the international community, they like to say like, oh, they've forgotten about Palestine, they want to move on their lives no matter what, but actually that goes with the colonizers' mission. They want us to be fragmented. But what I do worry about is the international community. I believe the international community holds great responsibility to fix the mistakes they have made, because we didn't decide one day that Palestine is going to be occupied. We didn't decide, we're going to leave it the Nakba and Naksa. So that's what I tell people. And especially like in the Arab world, you have to tell them that it actually is not true, and Palestinians want to go back and they want to see the liberation.
Hello everyone, my name is Sura. I actually believe it's both. It's both suffering and hope that unites us. Suffering shouldn't be the only thing that unites us because not everyone outside suffers. So does it mean that if you're a Palestinian and you live abroad and you're not suffering, so you don't feel united? I believe I was born and raised in Qatar, but since I was a child, I've always had the hope of visiting Palestine, going back to Palestine. I've had the hope that one day Palestine will be free, and I know for sure that one day Palestine will be free. So I believe that it's both suffering and hope, but mostly it is hope.
Absolutely.
I think hope gives you like a 50-50 chance, like we might go there, but it's not hope. It's certainty. We will go there, like just come and join us. So.
I just want to share a quick story. Has anyone here watched Five Broken Cameras?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an award-winning documentary, and it has won an Emmy Award and nominated for an Academy Award. But that's not the story here. I was in Palestine 3 weeks ago, and I was going home from, I was in the Balad in Ramallah, and I was going home. I took a taxi, and I was talking to the taxi driver, and he was telling me about like certain hurdles he has faced in his life, and then he started telling me how he got shot and how, you know, he was in prison and separated from his family. And we kept talking, and then he told me, you know, the film Five Broken Cameras, and I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I was Adib in the Five Broken Cameras, and I was like, that was, you know, an incredible like experience. You know, my taxi driver ended up being the guy who we watched in Five Broken Cameras, and I asked him more questions about his life and what happened after the film. And at the end, once I arrived back home, I asked him, do you still have hope after everything that you faced? And he's like, of course, like, why would I fight all this fight and not have hope? I think, and then you know, from that I got like, to answer the question, I would say, we are united despite the suffering. Because we have hope. In spite of the suffering that we face, we have hope that we will see a liberated Palestine, and I think that's what unites us as Palestinians.
I'd love to bump on the despite the suffering, because it's such an interesting question. Is it hope or suffering? And I think it's justice and love. A lot of people feel like, oh, you know, they relish in the suffering. They wouldn't even know how to be united if we weren't killing them. And I don't think that's the reality. I think it's the resistance to the suffering and the insistence that we survive and that we not die silently the way that they want us to. And that whole frame is justice. The right to return to our homes is justice. The right for equality for all is justice. The right for children not to be disabled in front of our eyes, because we hear about those who die, but we don't hear about the people who survive, changed and disabled forever. So I think our love of Palestine is so much bigger than being united by suffering. It's justice.
I want to give Ahed a chance to respond to this, because Ahed, I know that you have grown up with daily violence around you. You saw your uncle killed in front of you. You've had multiple cousins killed. You've been shot at yourself. You spent 8 months in Israeli prison as a child. And most recently, 3 of the recent martyrs in the West Bank you knew personally. One of them is your cousin. And yet what always shocks me about you is how much hope you have. And my question to you is how?
الأمل بيجي دايما من المقاومة، من إنه إحنا لما بتشوف الأطفال أو الجيل اللي بعدك ما بتكون بدك يعيش نفس الحياة اللي أنت عشتيها، فهذا دايما الإشي اللي بعطينا أمل إنه نقاوم. بالنسبة للإشي اللي بوحدنا هو الألم ولا الأمل، فبشوف إنه الاثنين مع بعض. يعني إذا كان الألم بدون أمل، هون رح نخلق شعب مهزوم أكثر من ما هو شعب مقاوم ودائما مستمر بصد الاحتلال. لما نمزج بين الألم والأمل هون رح نخلق مقاتلين حقيقيين من أجل الحرية وعدالة شعبنا. لما بطلع على الفلسطينيين الموجودين داخل فلسطين، على إخوتي وولاد عمي، الناس اللي حوالي، إنه دايما بوجه الاحتلال، دايما بقاوموا، بحكي عن جد شو اللي بخلينا دايما نكمل. لحد ما آخر فترة إخوتي وولاد عمي وكلهم بعد ما استشهد ابن عمنا اللي هو بعمرنا تقريبا قصي، صرت أشوفهم بعطوا يعني فعل اندفاعي بزيادة قدام الاحتلال. بيجوا بتصوروا معنا عشان إذا حد فيهم استشهد، أو دائما في الليل بعمل شفتات، شفت بحرس البلد إذا فاتوا الجيش، شفت بنام وهيك.
I want to clarify, they're taking pictures saying, use this for when I become a martyr, right?
Yeah.
That shocked me when she said that, but...
فصرت أشوف إنه الألم عن جد بحركنا إنه نقاوم بشكل أقوى، لأنه إذا كان الأمل بدون ألم فراح يكون تحركنا بطيء في إنه ندحر الاحتلال. فالأمل لازم يكون موجود، والألم هو فعلا موجود طول ما هذا الاحتلال موجود. ممكن الألم هو الشعور اللي بنحسه اللي بمنعنا من الخوف من الوقوف بوجه الاستعمار والاحتلال. أمل والألم بوحدونا بأنه ما بدنا شعور الألم يستمر لحد تاني أو حد تاني يعيشه. فهذا هو اللي بخلينا كلنا متوحدين، شعورنا كلنا بالألم من هذا الاحتلال، وأملنا بأنه ويقيننا بأنه رح ندحر هذا الاحتلال من أرضنا، رح نفكك المشروع الصهيوني الاستعماري ونحرر فلسطين.
Tariq, I want to ask you that, because when I hear her say that her little brothers are basically aware that they could be killed at any moment, she knows she could be killed at any moment, and we've seen that this generation is willing to put it all on the line. It makes me sad. It makes me sad to know that their lives are constantly at risk. So how do you maintain the hope with that knowledge?
Well, if it's about constant, continuous, endless suffering, then it's suicide. Suffering, as mentioned before, should be transformed into struggle. This is how we maintain this hope. But hope also is not an imaginary future. It's not a fictional thing. It should come with determination. And this determination is also accompanied by lots of work. And here comes a moment for the Palestinians, especially this new generation, to rethink and revisit the mistakes of the previous leadership and think strategically about how to rebuild the Palestinian national movement on new principles, to be inclusive, to be democratic, to be transnational, to include different Palestinian voices, social forces, political orientations, men, women, and civil society at large. They have to think in an innovative way, something that is really different than, the 20th century way of organization. We are living now in technological advancement, innovation, transnational world where this new generation who have really remarkable minds can build on this to transform Palestinian struggle into an organized one through new way of thinking and new actions at the level of grassroots, and even a way to pressure governments either in the Arab world or the West or in other parts of the world for the eventual objective of achieving Palestinian justice.
You have a comment.
Hi, my name is Dena Najjar, thank you. I wanted to add to everything that's been said about the question of suffering and hope when it comes to the Palestinian diaspora. I think the right word to use would be that our struggle and resistance at the same time. Yes, we struggle and resist differently to people inside Palestine. Some of us, especially in the younger generation, we struggle to answer the question, where are you from? And I don't think that we deserve to struggle to answer that question. I think being in the diaspora and in the younger generation, you are, from the second you are born, your existence is threatened as a Palestinian. And as we've heard before, and as it has been said, existence is resistance, especially when you're a Palestinian. So I think when we use the word struggle to describe what unites us as Palestinian diaspora, using the word struggle would be the right word to use. And struggle implies also resistance, as it also implies the two words suffering and hope. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I actually wanted to add to what Jenna was saying. My name is also Jenna, by the way. I am a Doha Debates ambassador. And as we've talked about the media biases and the portrayal of the Palestinian cause, and we've talked about resistance, I wanted to ask, you know, how Western media and Israeli media is so quick to depict any sort of resistance from the Palestinian people as terrorism, to incite that sort of post 9/11 sympathy and garner Western support, right? So when as Professor Tariq was talking about the new national movement, when you are creating this new movement, how do you use the Palestinian identity of struggling, of hope, of unity and love in a way that incorporates the identity and shifts the narrative away from, you know, the terrorism and moves forward and changes things this time around?
Please.
Well, Palestinian identity, again, is a complex, multidimensional, and we are not going into the details of this identity. There is something that can unify the Palestinians wherever they are, which is the justice of the Palestinian cause. And this should be the question, actually. Otherwise, if we go into details here and there, we will be distracted, and eventually we'll end up with a conflict like what's happening between the West Bank, Gaza, Fatah, Hamas, based on ideology, on interests, and so on. We have to perceive the Palestinian cause as something superior and much more noble than being involved in just sectarian clashes here and there. And this is how we shall emphasize when it comes to Palestinian identity. It's an inclusive identity. It's something notable when it comes to organizing ourselves again in a new Palestinian national movement.
I think the most important part too, if I may enter on this one, is that you're talking about having people who completely dehumanize you, define you. So how do you change that definition? You define you. You much louder and a more distinct voice define who you are. We don't apologize for the images, we simply challenge them by showing that, again, I like to use the language that's accessible. We want equality for all, that's all we're asking for. If you were in this situation, what would your solution be? This is who I am, this is what I support. You do not allow the person who wants to dehumanize you to define you. You have to take over the narrative.
So as we're pivoting to talking about the future and the way forward, I just want to take an informal poll here on stage. Raise your hand if you believe that you will see a free Palestine, a unified, independent Palestinian state in our lifetime. Oh, and the audience too, okay. That's a good majority. That's very optimistic. So now the question is, how do we get there? How do we build from here? Zain. Oh, okay.
When it comes to, hello, my name is Samira. When it comes to building unity, we talk about the identity that people have individually, but the collective identity should be something that every Palestinian and every person who is in support of Palestine and its freedom should be liberation. That should be the thing that unites us, liberation. And that kind of justice. Not just suffering and hope. Those things should lead to liberation.
you know, all of these words that we've been throwing around, which are like suffering, justice, love, hope, all of these things have one thing in common, and it's the fact that every single human being feels them, you know? So I think the essence of the Palestinian person and the Palestinian identity is just the right to be a human being, you know? To be, you know, what's quote unquote known as normal, you know? You know, as someone that's very creative, you know, when I come to write a poem or to sing a song or something, I'm always like, what can I do to talk about Palestine, to put it all there? But since we're talking about the Palestinian identity, I'm sure people in the diaspora have thought like, okay, well, I've said about Palestine, but can I say about like what I think, what I feel, you know, like what a normal person would do, where they don't have to kind of express their existence because it depends on it. So I feel like what's really driving this younger generation is that idea that they've seen how everyone can be a normal human being, and they just want to do that too. And I think there's nothing that's more empowering than the feeling of wanting to be human, because we all know what that is.
Just to answer the question that you posed, Dina, I think the first step that we have to take is sort of, you know, collectively imagine a liberated Palestine. And I think Professor Tariq touched on this. How do we imagine a Palestine that's free from what is we're used to today, you know, the current status quo? How can we imagine a liberated Palestine collectively outside of what we understand as a nation state? You know, there's different notions that we need to think of that we can, you know, as a collective, not as individuals, and not in a sort of romanticizing way, but like to come together collectively and imagine a liberated Palestine where we can think outside of the box of what we have today, you know, the occupation, the division, 48, Gaza, West Bank. How can we collectively imagine something outside of what we see today?
It's an excellent question. How? Tamim.
I absolutely agree, right? When you have the individual liberation in your mind and it becomes collective, that's what becomes really what pushes us forward. And like I agree with everything Professor Tariq said. We have to look at the internal factors, how we're going to resolve it. We have to break down the colonial narrative. And I'm so much of a realist that I believe leaders should sit together and include Palestinian voices, refugees. We should decide, this is going to be our airport. This is what we're going to name it. How are we going to rebuild our economy? How are we going to build our infrastructure? How are we going to safely, you know, dismember the colonial project and also get our rights back? And I think everything from naming our roads to our airports to the grocery stores we're going to have, how are people going to eat, and how are Palestinians going to go back, I think that's where it should start, and we should go on with it.
You wanted to add something?
Dina, I believe that if we look at the media a decade ago, it's the TV and news that used to always address our messages. And there's a lot of messages that weren't addressed. But now with this new generation, let's say the TikTok generation, it's much easier for us to address and talk about this message in our unique ways. So we have artists drawing art pieces, we have singers singing, we have makeup artists. So it's not just media controlling these messages, we are controlling them now. So it's much easier for us now to speak up, to say what the media hasn't told the people and the world or the Western people. These trends that are going viral now are very active and positive, and they're playing a major role in addressing what we want to say. And I believe we should keep it up.
Well, quickly, and then we'll go to Isra.
Just following up on what he said, how to get a collective vision, we start with ourselves, imagining ourselves actually there. Just ask yourself, what's the first thing you want to do after Palestine has been liberated? Let it sink in, think about it, like visualize it, and then everything after that, you'll feel like, oh, I'm working for a practical goal. I'm working for something real. It's not just something abstract that we're just talking about. Like, I'm going there. I'm going to name my shop Dukanat Yasmin. I'm going to do, just think of it as something real, and it's going to happen.
Do you guys imagine like that? You do.
We always say, like, تخيل فلسطين بعد التحرير, literally. Like, it's not something.
We can all imagine ourselves praying in Al-Quds. That's the first thing that we all want to do when we actually go back to Palestine, inshallah. And we will all do it, inshallah.
But not forgetting to imagine a secular Palestine with equality for all. So if you don't want to pray, you're welcome to.
Absolutely. Isra.
Quickly, I'll quote from Darish when he said, "We are sick of hope." This is first of all. Second thing, that as Palestinian, Gaza, West Bank, 48 lands outside, I guess we don't have other choices. Whenever the world doesn't recognize you as a human, as Palestinian, so you need to take it by power. And I guess if we go back to the impact of movements, 2021 movement after Sheikh Jarrah and after Gaza's words, it was like totally different when we feel as a Palestinian, when I experience the war in Palestine and was like living my life normally. I go out and I covered the war. I did everything normally, and I wasn't afraid like when I was here in Qatar 2021, and I was thinking just what's the tool that I'll use to feel at least that I'm there, I can help there. So we made that campaign. We started like multiple lives on social media accounts. We bring the bloggers and we make them to correct even the terms that we're using. For example, we talked about checkpoints yesterday, and the people when you say that checkpoint, you think that it's a normal checkpoint. You can't imagine there is army in these checkpoints and stuff. It's so tough, and you can't just imagine that you can kill at that checkpoint. So whenever we can imagine the life there, and whenever as Palestinians live there, can describe to the people and trying to use the tools that we have, even though social media, even though building the society, because the society in Palestine needs to be built in a correct way to to prepare ourselves to have the community and the country, the bent country. So I guess we need so much efforts. Everyone here are invited actually to take an action. That the action will be easier, very easy. Just think what you're doing right now and try to take an action in your field, what you can do actually to help the Palestinian there, or at least to correct the image. And piece by piece and one by one, hand by hand, I guess every one of us can affect there and impact in his way of rebuild the Palestinian community. And that's it.
As we're sort of winding down time right now, I want to give each of my three guests here a chance to give some closing remarks. Ahed, your generation is so important right now. And as we're talking about the way forward, what do you think is the most important thing to highlight? And what do you most want to see?
بشوف إنه المستقبل بالنسبة لجيلنا غير، لأنه زي ما حكيت جيلنا انتهت كل الفرص والحلول بالنسبة له، ما ضلش عنده خيار غير خيار المقاومة وبس. جيلنا كمان ممكن يكون بالمقاومة يقاوم بشكل أكبر من الأجيال السابقة، برغم من إنهم قدموا كل شيء بقدروا عليه، إلا أن جيلنا ممكن يكون بقدر يقدم أكثر لأنه مش محدود بحزب معين أو مع فصيل معين اللي بحد من إيش يقدم فعليا لفلسطين للوطن. بشوف إنه كمان بالنسبة لجيلنا الموضوع أسهل من ناحية توصيل الرسالة مع السوشيال ميديا، لأنه بالنسبة لنا التلفون والمواقع التواصل هي سلاح للفلسطيني بأنه يفرجي العالم الحقيقة للفلسطيني إيش هي. كمان إحنا جيل ورثنا من كل العالم بس الخذلان والاستعمار، فبنآمن تماماً إنه واجبنا ووظيفتنا في هاي الحياة إنه نسلم الجيل اللي بعدنا حرية وعدالة وفلسطين كاملة.
I guess going forward, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that we heard about Israt's brother dying. we heard about so many people in Ahed's life. I had Kifah and Mu'taz and Qusay, all also children and young men who died. And we most recently lost a girl named Jenna, who, like me, was a women's rights activist. And I'm never going to get to meet her. I'm never going to have that opportunity. And just going forward, I want us to never forget that these people are not sacrificial, that these are war crimes and crimes against humanity. And while we bravely speak of all these people that were killed simply because supremacists decided, we want to be where you are, therefore you must die. And going forward, we have to acknowledge and remember every single life and do everything in our power not to lose another one. And that is what, going forward, I want to focus on, is saving lives, is ending these endless disabilities that we've been subjected to. And as we go forward, saying we have the right to life. And like any other human being, we'll do whatever it takes to survive. Inshallah.
بدي أضيف كمان شغلة على الموضوع اللي حكيت فيه، إنه مين ممكن نشوف الضحية ومين المقاتل فعلا. فبشوف إنه الضحية فعلا هو اليهودي اللي تجرد من إنسانيته وسمح للمشروع الاستعماري بأنه يستغل الدين اليهودي ويعرفه للعالم كأنه احتلال واستعمار، وإنه يجي على فلسطين باسم هذا الدين. الضحية كمان مش الفلسطيني، لأنه دائما الاحتلال مش بس احتلال الأرض، احتلال العقل. بشوف العربي اللي بيقبل بالتطبيع ضحية أكثر من الفلسطيني اللي بيعاني وبموت وبنقتل بسبب الاحتلال. فإذا العرب فعلا بدهم يكونوا قوم منتصر لدينه وعروبته ولغته، فرح يضلوا محتلين وضحايا طول ما الاحتلال موجود في فلسطين. فحرية الوطن العربي وازدهاره بس بتحرير فلسطين. دون تحرير فلسطين فالعربي في عقله رح يضل محتل زي الفلسطيني، طول ما هو في عرب بيقبلوا التطبيع مع الاحتلال والحركة والمشروع الاستعمار.
Tariq, I want to turn it to you, and maybe we can bring it back full circle, since we are here for the World Cup and it has been such a unique moment for those of us who are Palestinian to see our stories in the headlines at a moment of joy and not necessarily a moment of conflict. Are you optimistic that this sort of momentum and euphoria that we are all feeling will persevere?
Well, I'm trying to be objective as much as possible, but in short, what I have just heard here from the new generation, be Palestinians, Arabs, and beyond, makes me confident, optimist that I will see a liberated Palestine from the river to the sea, hopefully during my lifetime. This spirit cannot be defeated.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for joining this conversation. It's been very spirited. And unfortunately, our time here has come to a close, but the discussion doesn't stop here. Get engaged, stay with us, and keep this conversation going. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. We are everywhere at Doha Debates. We'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on a lot of these important topics that we brought up today on this stage and also online. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us today, Professor Tariq, Ahed, Tamimi, Maysoon Zayid. Thank you as well to our amazing students who have clearly shown us what the future is and where we are headed and given us some hope to leave with. I'd also like to thank the Qatar Foundation for bringing us all together, and finally to the Qatar National Library for providing us with this beautiful space. For Doha Debates, I'm Dena Takruri, and thank you all for joining this conversation.